Okay, Ron, you told me you knew how to make this thing good. It's good. I'm a believer in ESR suspension. Let's talk a little bit about having a new bike and breaking a new bike in terms of its suspension the right way. How long does it take?
It depends on the bike. It depends on where you're riding.
Yeah.
I would say if you're riding a track with big jumps and stuff like that,
Right.
the suspension's going to break in, the chassis is going to break in a lot sooner.
You get a lot of movement.
A lot of movement, deep into stroke, you know.
But in general terms, is an hour a decent break-in, or does it take 2?
No, some of these bikes can, like the KTM, can take up to 20 hours.
Oh,
really?
Crap, to break in?
Chassis-wise, yeah. Yamaha, 10 hours, you know.
Really? So when you're breaking them in, you know, with factory settings, the way they come out of the crate, do you suggest backing off the compression and rebound to make it a little more supple and a little more manageable when it's new?
Again, that depends on the track you're riding.
Right.
If you're riding a track with soft dirt, big jumps, probably stock settings are going to work pretty good. But if you're riding a track that's hard packed, choppy, yeah, you're probably going to want to go out on the compression.
All right, so when you've got a brand new bike, it's out of the box, so everybody knows to check their tire pressure and things like that. But with suspension, it's so critical, right? So sag, let's talk a little bit about sag and how that works and what it affects.
Sag is a big thing as far as ride height, as far as turning. Like
so it's the shock sag, right?
Right. It's how much you sit into the travel.
Okay.
And so you need to look up the manufacturer's recommendation for sag.
Right.
And sag is a big thing with turning too. If a bike's not turning correctly, if it's understeering, it's
which explain understeering.
So understeering is like you go in and it wants to
turn slow.
Yeah.
Or pushes.
Right, if it's pushing.
Right.
If it's oversteering, you go in, it's wanting to knife in, it's wanting to turn too quick.
Okay, right.
So that's a good indication that if it's oversteering, your sag is too high.
Okay.
So.
All right, so you look at the manual, it tells you 95 to 105 maybe on the sag, but should you set it a little on the loose side or a little on the tight side when it's brand new?
I would say a little on the loose side. That way it'll break in a little quicker.
Okay. And then what about ride height on the forks?
Again, you want to go to your manual,
okay,
and see where they recommend setting that.
Right.
And that's a critical thing because these new bikes, 1 millimeter either way, the bike will turn or not turn.
Right. And a millimeter is like an RCH in my world, right?
Yeah, not the older bikes, you could move those things a lot, and they still didn't turn.
Right. No, I mean, when we had the 78 Yamahas, you know, with the monoshock on them and stuff, we'd move them 3/4 of an inch to get it to turn.
Right, and nobody back then was checking sag either.
And you moved my forks 2 millimeters, and
Correct.
it made it a different bike.
Correct.
You're like the Mother Teresa of suspension. I think you should be sainted.
No.
The bike is so compliant now. I was like, man, it was better than me before. Now it's amazing.
So it's much better.
Much better. I mean, it's just all those little changes all work in tandem, right?
Right. We cut your bars too.
And you cut the handlebars down.
Right.
How much?
Eighth of an inch on each side.
That's 2 RCHs.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah.
And then I noticed you put some spacers on the bolts of the lower triple clamp. What the heck's that?
That was something I saw somewhere else, and there was a big discussion whether it worked or not. And I said I wanted to try it, and I noticed it right away.
What does it do?
It's allowing the triple clamp to flex a little more. So on particularly like the Yamaha, they're kind of light on the front end this year. So it helps on entry of the corner, and it gives the front end more bite as you lean in. So,
but again, another seemingly innocuous part that makes a big difference in the way that the bike rides. And that's why I think, you know, old guys with new bikes, they get this thing, they get a manual or don't get a manual, you know, and it's online, and it's confusing. You got all these clickers and they all do different stuff. And so to recap, if it was brand new, number one, you got to plan on putting some hours on it. But before you do that, set the sag.
Correct.
Right? And there's a company that makes a really nice instrument for that that's magnetic that fits the axle, right?
I think that's as critical as having a tire gauge.
Who's that company? Do you know?
Moto Sag?
Moto Tool.
Moto Tool.
That's right. Excellent thing. And every time you mess with your bike, it's good to check that. So you're setting your sag to whatever the manufacturer's spec is. You're setting the ride height on the forks, and you're maybe backing off the compression and the rebound settings a little bit during break-in.
Right.
And then after break-in, should you then get, like I did, springs specifically for your weight? Or is there a range that the manufacturer builds to?
Well, each manufacturer in the book will give you the standard rate, the one below it, or above it.
And what weight rider?
And weight rider. But sag is a big indicator of the spring too.
Right.
So that's where you start getting into like measuring your free sag versus your sag. And then if you go deeper, you really need to measure the free length of the sag versus the set length of the sag. So free length is the sag, is the spring off of the the bike.
Yeah.
But it's critical because
I know, but I don't know what that is.
because
I don't know what that is. So
yeah, that part
that's why
is
I gave it
critical.
to you.
Yeah, that's where the tuner comes in. He knows how to do all that.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got to have the right spring, right?
Correct.
And in the front and the rear, or you're going to be fighting the clickers. Aren't going to do everything for you. Then the other thing is, if you're a tall guy, you have a different kind of leverage on the bike, right?
Tall guys actually can need a stiffer spring than a shorter, heavier guy
because
they have a
so
lot
much
of
leverage on the bike.
Yeah.
So, but that's something that a lot of people don't know.
Correct.
Is that you can't just go by your weight.
Correct.
I know Mike Bell, Too Tall, used to tell me that it was really hard for him to get the factory Yamahas the way he wanted them because he was so long.
He's tall guys, they're out of the range. You know, these bikes are built around average height guys, 165 pounds.
Yeah. They still put too stiff of springs for me. But
correct.
Is there anything else that you think in the general sense, not Yamaha specific, that people should look out for that are kind of new to a modern bike and new to the whole suspension game?
Look out for what?
For what?
Like what should they look for?
Well, I mean, you got to understand that the front affects the rear and the rear affects the front. That's the first thing. You can't just go cranking on the rear of the bike and not expect it to have a deleterious effect on the front of the bike.
Right.
Everything has to happen in balance, and I would say make small changes because they're so sensitive. You know, it's like how carburetors went from, round slide Makunis to more exotic stuff. There's just more ways to screw it up. It wasn't more ways to make it better.
Right.
And I think in a lot of ways the suspension is that way. There's so many ways to do it wrong now that it's hard to get it right. And I think making smaller changes at the beginning is really key, and then having buddies that also have the same kind of bike.
Correct. I think the big thing with suspension is people are afraid to touch their clickers.
Right.
And so you want to, again, look at the manual. Don't be afraid to play with the compression on your shot. Once you get your sag and everything set correctly, and I recommend like sessioning, like if you're riding a track, what I like to do is session a section of the track that's like maybe the roughest, and play with the high speed, play with the low speed. And if you get lost, go back to the OEM settings, 12 clicks out,
so
turn and a half.
Yeah, and on a shock, the high speed's the outside nut, right?
Correct.
And then you got the inside adjuster, and then you got the rebound at the bottom.
Right.
And then the forks, in KTM forks are very different than a Yamaha fork, and Showa is different than Kayaba, and we'll talk bike specific later on. But you need to know which one am I turning? Is it compression or rebound? And you need to do both forks to keep for
Correct.
a Yamaha. KTM has air on one side and damping on the other.
Right.
But really appreciate you spending the time to set this thing up. It's just magic, and I look forward to getting to know this bike the way you do.
It's definitely a great bike. There's no doubt about it.
All right, that's it for today from Old Guys and New Bikes here with Ron Schuler from ESR Transmission, right?
Suspension.
Transmission guy?
No.
I need to have you look at my Corvette. Thanks, guys.
If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos, comment what you thought, and share it with your friends.